Welcome to a 2 breakdown edition of You Comment, We Respond. You never know how many we're going to throw at you. This time it's 2. We are balanced in this way. Anyway, the first hand features probably our favorite player, probably the guy that we're the most fanboy of, Davide Kataï.
That may be right.
Yeah, it's called Every Poker Player Has Been in This Situation. Click right up there to check it out. It's a really cool hand in which Justin Bonomo opens under the gun in the 6-max tournament at the World Series of Poker, the 10K 6-max. Probably the toughest tournament in the world.
It's got a chance.
Not quite, but it's very tough. Davide flats out of the small blind with King Queen of Hearts. Martin Kozlov flats Ace Deuce off in the big blind. The flop is King 8 Deuce, which checks through. The turn pairs the deuce, giving Kozlov trips. Kataï, of course, has near the best top pair possible. He bets. Kozlov raises. Kataï calls. The river is a brick. Kataï checks. Kozlov moves in, and Kataï folds basically the top of his range.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot.
Yeah, correctly.
People had a lot of thoughts about this, and here we go. Theo Dowis says, Queen Jack could be a creative bluff. It blocks King Queen suited and King Jack suited combos, which makes it harder for Kataï to show up with the top of his capped range. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is pretty interesting, but I don't know if it's enough to make it worth bluffing, because you're only blocking the suited versions of those hands. Is Kataï folding King Queen off pre-flop? I mean, probably not.
He probably isn't. I think you're right. He's also got a lot of chips. He can really afford to just call.
I mean, it's not only blocking the suited versions, obviously. It's blocking the other versions, too. But if we include the other versions, then there's just a lot of hands that Kataï can have that can call the raise.
Yeah, I think he can call that even from the small blind. It's okay to be out of position with that hand in a 6-max tournament against Bonomo's opening range, even under the gun.
Right.
Because it's 6-max. I think he is calling with all of them. So that does make it worse, but it's a cool way to think about it.
It's good to try to find the blockers. In this very dry board, it's hard to think of potential blockers that you could have to value hands. So it's good to think of it that way.
And if you're thinking of specifically, all right, sometimes I'm going to have the deuce, but the times I don't, since I'm the only guy who can have trips or better here, and I'm raising, what are my bluffs? So something that can block Kataï having a good king is a pretty good thing. And so Queen Jack may be the best thing you could come up with.
That might be the best one because it blocks King Queen and King Jack. Yeah, that's interesting.
And he'll never show up with Ace King, so having an ace doesn't do anything for us. So I actually think this is probably right on.
That is probably correct. This is the best blocker hand.
If you're going to have a bluff, this is the bluff you can have.
Yeah, however, I don't know if on a board like this we need to be thinking about blocker hands because there's not that much that we can block. It's hard, like even though that does block King Queen and King Jack, it's not blocking that much.
It's not blocking much at all, but the idea is just so that way you have some bluffs.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with any bluffs.
Right,
so this would be the bluff you could come up with. All right, cool. Peter Mercel says, one of the morals of the story is this. It gets really awkward and impossible to make a confident decision when your whole range consists of only one hand. Here's looking at you, James Obst.
Well, I don't know if Kataï's whole range is only one hand.
One slow tear goes down for James Obst.
Yeah.
Pour one out, homies.
So is that positing that Kataï's range consists of one hand?
Yeah, a lot of people said something like that, where they thought his entire range was just King Queen there after he bets the turn and gets raised and calls. I don't know if I entirely buy that. I think it's a king probably, but I don't know if it's King Queen.
I don't know why it can't be King 10 or King Jack either.
Yeah. By the way, it might even be an 8.
Yeah.
Because Kozlov still can't raise with anything that, like we're saying, like Kozlov, if he's raising for value, has got King Queen beat.
Right, so it doesn't really matter which king you have.
Right, so you can actually have any king, you could have an 8, you could have well, I guess he's never going to show up with a pocket pair. It's hard for Kataï to show up with 8s also. There aren't very many 8s he can ever have.
8-9 suited maybe?
Maybe, he might be 3-betting that.
He might be?
He might not be.
Against Bonomo's under the gun 20 blind open, probably not.
Oh, 20 blinds. He might just throw it away.
He might just throw it away, but that's a candidate for a potential 8 that he could have. Or maybe Ace 8 suited.
Maybe. I don't think he's going to call Ace 8 suited. It's hard to have an 8.
It's close. However, I think the main point is I don't see a huge difference between King Queen, King Jack, and King 10 for Kataï versus Kozlov's range, so I don't really understand why King Queen could be the only hand he has, but it is seemingly the top of his range.
Yeah, and it's like King Queen, all the King Queens, probably all the King Jacks, and just the King 10 suiteds, I would think. Yeah. All right, cool. Next up is Who Played It Worse, which is Tom Dwan against David Oppenheim. It's a cash game hand. It's really cool and interesting. We struggled with this a little bit.
It was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, some interesting decisions, especially, well, actually from both players.
Yeah.
You can check it out right up here. Why don't you tell them what the action was, Mike?
All right, so Tom Dwan did some inexplicable things pre-flop. I'm going to say that. Okay. Ivy opened under the gun. Dwan decided to call with King 5 suited for some reason.
Yes.
Eliezer called out of the small blind. David Oppenheim with 2 red 9s made it 15K over 2,500 from the big blind, which makes sense against these players.
And also, you want to really thin the field with 2 9s, right?
Tom Dwan called after Ivy folded with king 5 suited for some reason.
Still sounds wrong.
It feels like a huge spew. Yeah.
Okay.
Ellie got out of there. We go heads up to the flop. The flop was a jack, a 10, and a 5.
Right.
2 spades. Bad flop for Opie, but he bets anyway. He bet 18K, and Dwan decided to call. The pot was now 72,000. The turn was the queen of clubs, which hits both of their ranges, kind of.
To be clear, Opie bet half pot on that sort of wet board flop, too.
Right. So the pot's 72K. The turn's a queen. It gives Opie an open ender and Dwan an open ender.
Brings a second flush draw, too.
Brings a second flush draw. Opie bets 29K into 72K. Very small bet.
Yeah.
Very strange. Dwan called. He was kind of priced in at that point with his open ender and pair. The river is a 3 of clubs, bringing the flush. Oppenheim, bets again, 57K, and Dwan folds the worst hand.
Strange hand.
Very strange.
So we really didn't like a bunch of the decisions that were made. Let's see what you guys thought. River Jordan 13 says, Tom's play is significantly worse.
Okay.
David's turn bet isn't as bad as you say it is because you neglect to take into account that he also bets the river, which is fair. Yeah, Tom may have to call the turn with most better hands, king, jack, ace, 10, but assuming Opie bets most blank rivers and the knowledge that Tom is going to have to fold those same hands, that makes it fine in my opinion. Not sure how deep they are though, which obviously changes things. They're pretty deep.
They're pretty deep. It looks like they have a ton of cash in front of them.
Yeah, so I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that changes things in this case. I think your points remain.
I mean, certainly once Oppenheim bets the river, it in a way justifies the turn bet. But at the time the turn bet occurred, it felt like a really bad decision. Also, the sizing seems like it's pretty indefensible. It's very bad sizing in my mind.
I agree. It's really weird. I mean, he's repping the nuts essentially with that size. But even with the nuts, I don't know he'd bet that little. There's 2 flush draws out there.
Yeah, wouldn't you want to charge all of the... I mean, Tom called the flop. He has so many hands he can call with on the turn. You would bet more with the nuts, you would think.
You would think. Also, that queen completes a lot of stuff for Tom, as we talked about in the video. Completes 2 pairs, completes straights. If you have the nuts, I'm pretty sure you bet more.
Right, and like I just said, Tom has so much he can call with on the turn. That's a problem for betting in general here. It means you have to follow through with the river bet, which is good that he did, but that's still scary, high variance, and it's the spot you don't have to be in.
The thing is, right, he didn't have to bet the turn.
Yeah.
He had a hand that had some value. So it's weird if you're gonna bet small and sort of weird, and I think he does extricate himself nicely, but to me that doesn't excuse the turn bet, although a lot of you felt differently.
And I guess the answer was Tom played it worse, and I'm assuming that's because of pre-flop stuff. And
it would have to.
It'd have to be, and I kind of agree just because it's so bad pre-flop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Also, Tom lost a lot of money.
He did.
All right, Brandon Johnson says, I feel like the pride of professional poker players gets overlooked too often. They feel like they can just outplay each other all the time. As soon as he had position, Dwan was waiting for one show of weakness, and when he didn't get it and didn't improve his hand, it was time to let it go.
That is possible, that Tom Dwan does get in so many pots in such weird ways that maybe pride is part of it. You know, that's I mean, how else can you excuse this king 5 suited call, both pre-flop calls, right?
I mean, it's really hard to. You can make the case that they're deep, he's in position, and he has some equity, and he is Tom Dwan.
Maybe he thinks Oppenheim sucks. Maybe he thinks, like, I can own this guy. You know, who knows? Maybe that's part of it.
I mean, maybe. It just seems like, I don't know why he called in the first place. Like, there was a under the gun race by Ivy anyway, right?
Yeah.
Why did we call the first time? We're +1 with this hand. I don't know what's going on. They're not playing props right now.
No.
It's a weird and seemingly bad decision. I think Tom has a lot of gamble in him.
Yeah.
And they just felt like playing, which is not a really good reason to play.
Right, and I think actually post-flop he played it totally fine.
Yeah.
I think he probably would have bet the turn if Oppenheim checked, maybe.
I don't know if he would have or
It's close. It's close. What about the river? You think if Oppenheim checks the river, what do you think Tom's going to do there?
Oh, it's a good question. Tom probably has to bet because I don't think he can beat anything that Opie has in the
I assume he would bet pretty big, try to get the one pair hands to fold like the ace-queens.
Exactly. Ace-jack, ace-10, ace-queen. You wouldn't think you're trying to fold out 2 9s.
Right.
But yeah. But the ace-queens of the world, even ace-jack, like I think you could bet pretty big and hope they go away. I mean, backdoor clubs comes in, other stuff is there. It's not going to be an easy spot.
Yeah, I do agree that pride is involved, but I don't know if I agree that professional poker players have more pride than the average poker player. There's a lot of poker players out there who play in a way that I like to call the FU player.
Yeah.
And that's based on pride or anger or something where they're doing things not because they think it's right, it's because they are the people who want to win the hand, and how dare you try to take the pot away from them. You're always trying to steal from them, that type of thing.
Yeah, actually, most professional poker players aren't like that. They're
Yeah.
much more calculating, really, and trying to take advantage of that sort of play. But they may sometimes misthink about how strong their play is versus one of their opponents. Maybe that ultimately means it's pride, where they think like, well, I'm in position, I know I'm really good, I think I'm better than this person, so I'm going to play the hand.
Right, that's fair. But I think overall, I would say pride is less of an equation in a professional's mind, or else they can't maintain that professionalism and they'll lose money over time.
I agree.